Hey, everybody. It's Cindy Phillips here with Ryan O'Hara. And just to make sure everybody knows we're live, today is June 21st, and we're coming at you live. I'm just a little bit south of Austin, Texas. Ryan, tell us where you're at today.
We are near Detroit, Michigan.
There you go. And it's 12:30 Central, 1:30 Eastern, and we're going to be with you for about the next 60 minutes or so. You're probably asking yourself, where's the grumpy looking guy with the little bit of the beard sometimes and the shiny dome? That would be Chris Weiser. And Chris is out doing something wonderful today. He's at a golf event with some very dear friends for charity. So hey everybody, let's throw Chris, hang loose and wish him a good golf score. Nothing you can brag about though, Chris, right? Just good enough to win. That's what we're wanting for you. And Ryan and I are here today. And Ryan, tell us, what do you have in store for us today?
Today, we're going to start a 4-week process of talking about what a lot of you techie folks love to talk about most, the tools. But the lead into that is make sure that you've watched the other 4-week segments that both Cindy and Lindsay have done over these last 8 weeks. Because without the sales and without the marketing, you really don't have an opportunity to use and take advantage of these tools that we're going to be talking about over the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds like really sound advice. Everybody always wants to go to the tools first. Go to the tools first. So we've kind of put you in a tough position because we've got you batting cleanup, right?
Right.
But I tell you what,
it's all the same to me. It's all good.
You put the good stuff in the cleanup position.
Yes. Right. So let's get rolling here. So like I said, we're going to talk this week about the cybersecurity risk assessment stack. One of the things that probably brought you here in the first place, you're looking to scale your business. You're looking to network with growth-oriented MSPs. You want to get invigorated for this year, and you're cautious about a stack that gets you $300 plus per seat. I mean, that's one of those topics that in the big Facebook group that we manage tends to elicit quite a bit of response. So what does it entail? What is part of that stack? We're going to talk about all of that stuff over the next 4 weeks. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about understanding the risk and go over the risk assessment stack itself. These are the things that get you started. We have a saying in 7-figure, all roads lead to the cybersecurity risk assessment. This is where you're going to show your customers, your prospects, what their risk actually looks like. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Next week, we're going to talk about standardizing the stack. This is something that I think is commonly overlooked with a lot of MSPs, where they're just throwing out different stacks for different clients based on what that client needs. And we're going to talk about the value of streamlining that stack and looking towards you're the one that dictates the stack as opposed to the customer coming back to you and saying, I want this, this, and this, because we all know that they're not qualified to make that decision in the first place. Then week 3, we're going to talk about the support stack. So the stuff that probably most of you are more familiar with. And we're going to go through kind of the pros and cons of some of the tools that can make your support stack a great fit for your MSP. And then finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, the security stack. This is where those $300 per seat posts tend to devolve into. What does that include? And really the gist of that $300 per seat stack is that we are putting cybersecurity first. And these are full all-in cybersecurity stacks to go forward.
So Ryan, that's a great agenda for the next 4 weeks. I just want to invite our listeners that are here with us live. If you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn, you need to give StreamYard permission to show your name. Ryan, do you know how to tell people to do that? I always get a little confused.
There should be in the comments section, there should be like a little link that they can click on that'll do that.
So be sure to click on that link right now if you don't mind. I'm watching the comment stream, and I'll be feeding Ryan some of those comments as they come up. So if you have questions that you'd like an answer for live, go ahead and do that so we can see your name and know that you're with us. So back to you, Ryan.
Awesome. So getting into this week's agenda, why do we always start off with a CSRA? So this is something that I think there's a lot of MSPs out there that do assessments to some degree, but specifically a cybersecurity risk assessment. Why do we always start with this? And the big reason is that most of the prospects that are out there, they don't know what they don't know, right? They are making this business decision based on most cases, zero evidence, zero details, zero information. For whatever reason, it still baffles me today how many business owners that are out there that will make an IT decision just based on nothing, right? Like they will make use the same amount of information they used to where to get their coffee that morning on where to base their IT. And so problem with that is that they don't understand what their risk is. They're not even thinking about risk in most cases. So they're thinking about like the old days of IT where, they're more concerned with, who's going to come out and map my printer, who's going to fix my computer when it's slow, who's going to, map me to that network data. They're not thinking about their risk. And we see this every day. How much risk there is actually out there, people getting attacked on a daily basis, and the majority of those being small businesses, and a lot of that tends to go under the radar. We have one of our vendors who I think admittedly stole it from somebody else on one of our stages, said, you're not too small to get hacked, you're just too small to make the news. And that's really what we're dealing with from a small business perspective, is they don't understand that this stuff is really happening because small businesses typically don't talk about it, and they're too small for this kind of stuff to make the news.
Exactly. And Douglas, we can see your name and comment. Just wanted to let you know that.
He's just testing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Us IT guys like to test things. All right. So what makes our assessments different from other assessments? So, again, this is not something that's uncommon in the MSP community. There are a lot of MSPs out there that will do, free network assessments or free external scans, free dark web scans. What we do when we are doing a cybersecurity risk assessment is we are gathering as much data as possible to give them a complete picture of what they're looking for, or what risk is really out there. Again, the goal here is that we need to make sure that that particular prospect or existing client has a really good understanding of what their risk is, and again, they typically don't have that. So what we're doing that's different from those free network assessments, from those insurance company scans, is we're taking a deep dive into a lot of areas of their business. So are we still doing those network assessments and scanning for vulnerabilities? Absolutely. Are we still scanning those external IPs to see what information is out there? Absolutely. But we're taking that and we're using that in relation to the bigger picture. So we're doing a lot more data, and then to me, the important part too is not just the data that we're gathering; it's how we analyze that data, and the story that it tells, and the story that we can tell that prospect or that customer to really make it to drive it home and have them have a better understanding of what their risk looks like.
And let's just let James know that yes, this is available as a recording. It'll be posted later today.
Yes. So this will be posted in the guides section of the Facebook group for you to come back and look at earlier or at any time. And then just to also revisit that, definitely go back and watch the last 4 weeks with Cindy and the previous 4 weeks with Lindsay, because without the sales and marketing, you're not going to be able to do much with any of this stuff, because you're not going to have any customers to run these things on. So what kind of stuff are we looking for when we do the CSRA? We are looking for things, and we break these into categories because it really, it makes it easy to digest. It makes it easy to explain to those prospects. We are looking for, what's going on with their team, what's going on with their applications, and that includes software as a service, which is a really, really big deal these days. What's going on with their network, and most importantly, what's going on with your data. I mean, the data in a lot of cases is the thing that's got the value that the hackers are looking for, the thing that's going to allow them to, offer that ransom, and something as simple as, the information that's going to allow them to get into your network and do a business email compromise and things like that. So those are the categories that we look at, and so that moves us into kind of the tools portion of this. How are we gathering all of this information? What are some of the tools that can be used to gather this information? We internally at Seven Figure MSP are tool agnostic, so we don't care what tools you use to get this information. We do offer some of these tools to our members, either for free or at a significant discount. But if you have a tool that you use that can gather this information, feel free to use it. It's the information that we're after, not the specific tools. And so the first step is kind of an optional one. I really like the idea of using this because I think it makes your job a lot easier as you're gathering this information, and that would be an RMM tool, a remote monitoring and management system. Most MSPs already have this because they're using it for their ongoing support. But this is something, if it's a new prospect, that can really make your life helpful, because it allows you to streamline, it allows you to script, it allows you to push out all of these other tools from that single point. The other thing that I recommend for people, and what I like to do when I had my MSP is, I would go out and have the kickoff meeting where we talked about the assessment and kind of what their responsibilities are, what we were going to do, and I would sit in front of each computer and install the RMM tool. And what that allowed me to do was see some of the things that I wouldn't be able to see otherwise. So I'm sitting at these machines for like 5-10 minutes at a time, and that gives me visibility on, are their computers, are the screens locking? Do they have a Post-it note under their keyboard with a password on it? Walking into their building, do they have, doors unlocked, doors propped open? Right. I've got a really, an interesting story about one that I did. Cindy and I have talked about this many times, where I went in and they had this great physical security system. They had these awesome, electronic locks on the doors and access control system and everything. When I got there, the person who I had spoken with several times knew I was coming. They weren't there, and they didn't let anybody in their staff know. I walked in, they had all of these fancy door locks all propped open. The gentleman that I spoke to when I got there, I just told him that his boss had said, scheduled me to come in here and do this stuff. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't pick up the phone and make a call, and he let me sit down at every single computer to do what I needed to do, which, I needed to get that done, but he didn't know that was the point. So that was definitely something that ended up in my report.
I mean, it's like all the spy movies we watch, right? Where the guy comes in with the clipboard and the uniform shirt, and they let him in and do anything.
Yep.
Really good point.
And that is a security concern, because if somebody can do what I did, they can very easily walk in and install, God knows what on your computer. So definitely something that's important to look at. Don't ignore the physical security and things like that. So another tool that we use, I mentioned that SaaS is becoming so important these days, and also a common objection that we see from people: all my stuff is in the cloud, so I'm good. And this is really to show them why they are still at risk and how they are at risk with their stuff in the cloud. Almost everybody that we run into these days has stuff in the cloud in some degree or another. So SaaS monitoring is super, super important. We've got a couple of tools that we recommend for this piece of it. A tool called SaaS Alerts is a really great one. It plugs into a customer's 365 or Google Workspace tenant, and it will monitor things like login attempts. So you can show them, and I've got it on another slide here, it shows them a nice, cool map of all of the login attempts that have happened over a given period of time, so they can realize, hey, you're actually actively under attack right now. They may not have your passwords yet, although we've had some experiences where people have run these and found during the course of the assessment that particular prospect was actually already breached. And obviously you got to switch gears at that point. But it's super important information to know. So like that idea that my stuff's in the cloud and I'm safe, it's a myth. It's not true. Another really good one is a tool called Augment, and they have an agent that you can run on these machines that will catalog over time applications that are being used on the machine itself, and then any SaaS applications that are being connected to either through those applications, those installed applications, or via a web browser. So why is this important? So this can be a big deal. Like if you're working with a prospect who has 365, so you're going to expect to see things like OneDrive. You're going to expect to see things like SharePoint. But what happens if their bookkeeper or their accountant is also accessing a personal Dropbox account a couple of days a week? Is that just, hey, they're logging in and checking on personal work that they have, maybe on their break, and maybe it's not a big deal, perhaps? Is it that they're logging in and they're moving this stuff and taking it home so they can work from home? Hey, it's great that they're working from home, but you have no idea what kind of security they have in their computers. If they're transferring files to work on at home with no security on that home computer, and those files have personal identifiable information on them, like people's social security numbers, that could be a problem. Or worst case scenario, they could just be copying customer data over because they're getting ready to leave and steal all your customers. So things like that are really, really important to make sure that you understand and uncover, because the business owner needs to know these things. And again, we're trying to show them where their risk is, because they have no idea.
One of the great things about this is you've drilled in so closely to the people side of the equation while we're still talking about technical stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the number of times we've had business owners tell us, I don't need any security, everything's in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
It's really life-changing when they realize that that's not the case. And speaking of life-changing, I think it might be time to let everybody know where you're going to be in August. So one of the things that's going on in August is Ryan and the rest of the Figure MSP team is going to be in Chicago. And guess what they're doing, baby? One night they're going to Wrigley Field to the, what's it called? The Lofts at Wrigley?
I'm not sure where it's a rooftop in Wrigleyville
Roof-
where we're going to be able to see the game. I'm not sure what the name of the actual rooftop that we're going to be on is. But the other cool thing, which just happened to work out by coincidence, is this is going to be the crosstown rivals game. So this is going to be the Cubs versus the White Sox, which will be really, really cool.
And so I'm going to let Ryan get back to work, but we love baseball around here. So I can't think of a better way to spend some quality time with your friends in the MSP field talking about the crazy things that people do in their businesses.
For sure. All right, so let's move on to the next one. So here's the slide that I was talking about. So this is one of the pictures that you can get out of SAS alerts, and it shows an example of all of the different login attempts across the country that have happened. In this example, obviously there's a lot of stuff. So if you're in my case, a Michigan-based business, and you don't have customers people on logging into your system from all across the world, are you going to be a little bit concerned that you've got people logging in from France and Nigeria and Kazakhstan? Probably signs that something's going on. Now, this doesn't mean that those are successful attempts, but it'll tell you that as well. But just knowing that these things are out there and then tying that together and then finding out, hey, this particular prospect doesn't have MFA enabled either. That puts them that much closer realistically to any one of these login attempts turning into a breach really, really quickly. And that's why they need to know these types of things.
Yeah.
Phishing simulation is another good one. We just talked a little bit about kind of the human factor all the way around. And so clicking on a phishing link is your bread and butter type of issue. So being able to show them, because it's another one of those things when you're talking to business owners, every single business owner seems to understand that this is a thing and that people click on phishing emails all the time. But almost every time they come back and say, but not my employees, my people know better than that, or I know better than that. And how many times is it the business owner that ends up being the one that clicks on this stuff?
And they're going to tell their team that there's a phishing test underway.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's why we fish for 30 days.
Yep. So that's one of the things where sometimes this can take a little bit longer to get accurate information to really tell the story. So when we run these phishing simulation tests, I recommend at least doing 3 campaigns across all of the people. And what I have found personally when I was running these with my MSP, a really good cadence that seemed to work was doing the easy one first, and then doing the medium one, and then doing the hard one in the middle. The easy one is kind of like the one where like, hey, I know this is coming, and then they get that false sense of security knowing that they're good. The hard ones are a lot more difficult. So those tend to give you a little bit better results. And then that third one, I usually do the medium difficulty one, because at that point, they're still not really expecting it. And it really ends up giving you some pretty good results, a baseline over across those staff, that end user base, to see what's going on and show the susceptibility to clicking on these things. And again, it's oftentimes the owners and the leadership, the ones that are think that they know better and aren't going to click on these things, and the ones that even know that this stuff is coming, that tend to click on this stuff more often than not. So being able to show those things is really, really helpful.
So do you remember the story about the phishing campaign that was the one that worked the best? One of our members partnered up with a local restaurant, got permission to use their 2-for-1 lunch special, sent that thing out with a false link. And like everybody in the Chamber of Commerce clicked on it. And that was his precursor before he did a webinar, or not actually a webinar, it was a live presentation at the chamber to help people understand how big the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
And he spun that into some education and some stories and really kind of lit the risk light bulb, as we're fond of saying around here, for people in his town.
And that's a great way of showing how like you can get creative with a lot of this stuff, right? So that has a local flavor, so it's not something that they're used to seeing in a phishing simulation, if that's something that they had or are familiar with. But like tying all of those things in together, like part of the issue that we face is one, like I said, they don't know this information in general in the first place, but two, they have a hard time putting themselves in a position where they think that this can happen to them.
That's right.
If you start talking about statistics and percentages and stuff like that, oh, well, that's fine. I've got a 50% chance of that not being me. And I'm super smart, so I know I'm not going to have that problem, right? They can separate themselves from it, even if there's only, a 5% chance that it's not going to hit them, right?
Exactly.
So putting them in that space, and realizing that they can do that, that's a lot of what this is all about. And one of the things that we do when we go through these results with prospects is we talk about this by using stories. So we'll use stories of breaches that we know that have happened, that we've been involved in remediating, and even with delivering the results of the assessment. What I used to do and what I tell people to do is, you're not just going to go off and read all of the things that you found, just the data dump from these different tools. You're going to take all of this information and put it together and tell a story. Tell them the most likely way that they're going to be hacked. One of our members was pointing out that this is kind of like the IT version of the Tom Cruise movie where they are predicting the future crimes. And now I can't think of the name.
Minority Report.
So,
Minority Report is really one of my favorite movies for that very reason, because it takes you from a world that you think you understand to a world that is unlike anything you've ever seen. And it was a very small step.
And it's great that you put it that way, because that's exactly what we're doing in most cases when we're presenting these CSRA results.
So my favorite thing about the dark web scan is, here's a way to think about the dark web. I don't know if anybody on the call today is a fan of that old HBO series called The Wire. But The Wire had two kinds of people who were in the game and people who weren't. If any of your information has ever been exposed in a data breach, you're in the game. You're in the game with the hackers, and you just don't know it. And I think it's really important to be able to put that kind of frame around what a data breach really means. And then to realize that information's out in the wild and you can never get it back.
Right. And so this is one, doing the dark web scans again. This is one that tends to be relatively common in the fly-by-night type assessments. It's really easy to pull quick, and it's also one of those ones that I think people have traditionally used as a smoking gun to show people. And it's, for the end users, it's not typically the smoking gun that you think it is, but it is very important. They need to understand why it's important. So one of the other things that we get from members is, hey, I ran a dark web scan and we didn't hardly get any results. So like, I don't want to show that information. But in most cases, you just need to do a little bit more digging. And that's why, the point being is, all of these things are just parts of the assessment process. They're tools that are going to gather it. You have to look at the context of everything around it. So I had a situation with one where they had 0 dark web results, and did a little bit of digging, did some talking to the business leaders, did some talking to some of the employees, and come to find out that while they had domain email, pretty much everybody that worked there was doing all of their company business through Gmail accounts. So that's why they didn't have any dark web hits, because they weren't actually using them. So what looked like on the surface that they didn't have a whole lot of risk, actually, when you dug deeper, turned out to be a lot more risk than had they had 5 or 10 dark web results on there.
Absolutely.
So make sure that you do a lot of digging. You ask contextual questions to go along with this data. It's not about just running the tools and presenting a list of things that you found. It's running the tools and analyzing what you found and putting that together, also with in combination with different conversations that you're having with people.
And here's what that means for you. That's my favorite thing. Here's what that means for you.
And so vulnerability scanning. So this is one that I think some people do it, some people don't. I think where this one goes under the radar is when you sell that client and move forward with ongoing services. If you're offering services that are related to cybersecurity, vulnerability and network scanning is so key. What we're doing here is we're looking for signs of vulnerabilities that have been posted and cataloged. And this is going to be on both your endpoints, your servers, and network equipment, anything attached to the network. Okay. What people tend to do after the assessment and when they're doing ongoing services for people is they forget about this piece of it. And when you're doing things for security, you need to look at it in a different perspective. So a lot of people will look at vulnerability scanning and go, well, I don't need that because we've got, patching through our RMM or patching through Intune and our third-party patching tools. So we're good. So long as we're making sure we're patching for things, we shouldn't have to worry about vulnerabilities. The problem is we all know that, like, especially the third-party patching tools tend to be a little bit finicky and not always super reliable. But you may have a situation where you have a piece of software or a switch on your network that has a vulnerability that there's not a patch for yet. And you really need to know that exists so you can make some decisions on how you want to protect that network. Do you need to, is that a critical infrastructure type device that you need to have running in order for them to operate? And then you need to look at some ways to maybe segregate that off the network. So this is how you're going to look at it when you're doing an assessment. You need to find those things. It's not just about, hey, your patching isn't working. It's, hey, you got these vulnerabilities out here. This one doesn't actually have a patch for it, and we need to do something about it. Or even finding stuff that you don't care about. The number of people that we would do scans for and find out, hey, they've got their Amazon device plugged into the network because, they want to talk to it and ask questions. That's great, but you've got it on your corporate network and you don't know, any vulnerabilities that may be addressed to that. And it's not necessary. It just needs internet access, so finding things like that and putting all of those pieces together. But a lot of this is just about identifying where those things are.
Excellent.
And personal identifiable information. So this is another key piece. We need to know what data is out there. And another one. I love the questions that we ask with business owners before we do all of this stuff, because it tends to be very, very similar from business owner to business owner. We don't have any personal identifiable information. We don't keep any of that stuff on our network, so we're good. We don't have to worry about that. And every single time you find a boatload of it. If they're doing, if they've got employees and they're doing payroll, chances are they've got stuff stored on there that's going to have social security numbers. They always have some sort of personal identifiable information. And the fact that they don't know about it in the beginning is just another point that they need to understand their risk.
Absolutely.
You're not storing social security numbers for your clients, your customers, doesn't mean that you don't have that information for your employees. Your employee can sue you if you get breached and their information gets out there. So it's still important information to have. But we need to be able to show them what they have, where they have it, so that way decisions can be made on how to protect that data and what to do with it in the future. So making sure that we've got that stuff scanned and we can catalog where that stuff is really helpful to be able to do that.
That's good. So, hey, let's take a breath here before we go to the password scanner. And let's put up our live.sevenfiguremsp.com link and just take a brief moment to point out what we do when we have a live event. So in Chicago, we're going to have a 2-day event. There is a full pre-day. And Ryan, when we were in Nashville a few weeks ago, the pre-day was a full day with you, and it was all about how to dig deep into doing the cybersecurity risk assessment. I'm not sure what the topic's going to be in Chicago, but the pre-days are usually just packed with actionable information where you can take it away and take action immediately. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone who's with.
Yeah, those are great too, because they're a little bit more relaxed and casual. So it's a really good opportunity to meet with other MSPs and talk to people. And then typically it rolls right into our welcome reception happy hour too. So nice way of having some conversations and rolling into some booze.
There you go. Okay, so tell us about password scanners.
So password scanning is one that has been a big one lately. The number of people that store their critical passwords in their browser and don't realize how easy it is to access those sometimes, tying right in with the people who we've run into for years, where they've got an Excel or a Word document named passwords, and it stores all of their company information in that. So being able to go into one of these assessments and then and walk in and present like, hey, here's all your passwords. It wasn't hard for us to find all this stuff. They really do oftentimes think that they're being clever and secretive, and it's not their fault. I mean, it's in most cases they just don't understand a lot of what's going on, and especially with browser passwords. I mean, most people just go, oh well, hey, if the Google is offering to store my passwords in Chrome, it must be safe, right? And it goes back to what I said earlier. Most cases people don't know what they don't know. And what we're trying to do throughout this is show them and help them. So being able to go through and show them some critical passwords, and tie that into like real world events. Just talking about how I believe it was Cisco that got hacked, and the way that they got hacked initially was because a hacker randomly got access to somebody's home computer, and they stored a lot of their critical passwords in their Google account in their Chrome browser, and they were able to get into a Cisco VPN just because of that. So that's how these things happen and how they're so common. Like, you can have something like that and it was really accidental that they hit that large company, in the grand scheme of things. So making sure that they really understand all of the different ways that they're susceptible, all of the different ways that they can get compromised and breached, and the way that they're most likely to do it. So putting all of that stuff together is super, super important.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about gathering all of this information and all of the data. I mean, that's kind of the easy stuff, especially for us techies. Now, what do we do with that data now that we have it? Again, we're not going to take that data and just pop it up and with a list of all the vulnerabilities we found and say, look, we found all these vulnerabilities. You got to tie all this stuff together. I mean, we're definitely going to put that slide up so they can see it, but that's background information. You need to put all of this stuff together. And so kind of going back to that minority report example, like what I tell people to do is, think of all that data gathering as, your CSI technicians. They're out on that crime scene. They're gathering that evidence. They're giving us the information that we need to look at things as the detective. The only difference here is that instead of, a detective who's trying to figure out how a crime was committed, we're being filling that minority report role, and we're telling people how the crime is likely to be committed. Pre-crime, exactly. So what does the evidence tell us? Taking a look at that information, predicting the crime scene, evaluating all of that. And some of the examples of where this can come in handy, I talked a little bit earlier about, looking at all of the login attempts to a 365 tenant, and then matching that up with the knowledge that they don't have MFA on any of these accounts. That kind of stuff is critical. If you have a list of things that you found on the dark web tied to the fact that they don't have any MFA, like, you've basically shown them that there's already a roadmap out there that exists for somebody to buy that information on the dark web and log right into their stuff. You're 30 seconds away at that point from getting hacked. But looking at all of those different data points and figuring out, what the risk looks like for them. Are they highly susceptible for, something like a business email compromise? And what does that mean? And kind of walking them through what something like that looks like. And that's something too, where today we're seeing a lot more of that, with, the fact that people are, seem to be less likely to pay ransom. So ransomwares are starting to drop, ransomware attacks are starting to drop down, because if they can get into your email and trigger one of those business email compromise and get a hold of your bank account information, they don't need you to make that decision. They just go in and grab that stuff, right? So showing them these things so you can start seeing them sitting in that chair going, that could be me.
Yeah.
Because before this, they had none of this information in their hands or in their heads. And, they were just easily able to sit back there and go, I don't think this really exists. It's not that big of a problem. I don't know anybody who's had this happen to them, so it's not going to happen to me. And
nobody talks about it when it happens to them. Okay. No business owner out there is going to go to a Chamber of Commerce meeting and wave his hand and say, hey, I got something to share. My company just got hacked last night.
Right.
Nobody does that.
And I run into that all the time with people where they have that philosophy. I don't know anybody. And, I usually tell them, I guarantee that you know somebody. So, I went through a business email, or not, that wasn't a business email compromise. I went through a ransomware event. And, that was one of the things I talked to the guy about. This was last year. And when we were in the middle of this, we were waiting, we had some downtime while we were waiting on a couple of things. I was talking to one of the owners and I asked him, I was like, what if I had come in here 6 months ago and started talking to you about, cybersecurity and why you need this kind of stuff? And he, in the middle of all this, he just kind of laughed and said, I probably would have thrown you out of the store because, we didn't need it. It wasn't going to happen to us. And here we were, where they were spending, tens of thousands of dollars to remediate and get out of this stuff. So it's so important to get this information in front of these business owners and let them know why it can happen to them. And that business owner as well, I know pretty well these days, and he's not going around telling everybody that it happened to them.
Oh, no, nobody ever talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's not until you shift your focus. And for everybody on the call, set up some Google alerts, right?
Yep.
Because you want to look for things that are happening in your geography, things that are happening in your vertical industries, and you want to be looking for computer issues or computer incidents, right? Because nobody's talking ransomware anymore, right? And you want to make sure you're looking for people talking about poor financial results. Well, why is that exactly? Oh, we had a computer issue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's how people talk about it now.
Yep. So how long does all of this take? This is something, it sounds like an awful lot of work. I'm used to doing those fly by night things where I could just pop in a domain or an IP address and do a dark web scan and give them something and see what happens. It does take a little bit of time. It does take a little bit of work, but that's what makes it different. I talked a little bit about this in the beginning. What makes these different from all of the assessments that MSPs and insurance companies have been doing for years and years and years? It's about taking all of that data and painting a complete picture for them and giving them this information. When you just show somebody dark web results or that they've got vulnerabilities exposed on their external IP address, they don't typically understand what that even means. So they're not interested in it. It's not real to them. By gathering all of this information and presenting it in a way that tells them how they're most likely to get hit, it allows them to see that stuff with fresh eyes and put themselves in that position. That's why this is different. That's why it's worth taking the time to do that kind of thing. So
and that's why you get a fee for it.
And that's why you get exactly. So we for prospects when we're doing this, we do charge for these assessments, and we recommend that you charge for these assessments because there's a lot of time.
It's absolutely a professional services engagement, and you put your best people on it.
And it doubles as a really good opportunity for you to show them, your white glove level of support. So it's kind of that first date where you're showing them, who you are and how you operate and how you do business. So by showing them that complete process, by having those in-person interviews with people and getting that full context as opposed to just running a couple of tools, you're able to show them how you do business. So full CSRA takes about 30 days to do for some of the things that take some time. Some of the pieces you can usually run and get data within a day or two. So things like the PII scanning, the vulnerability assessments, stuff like that. Some of the things that take a little bit more time to get a complete picture, that SaaS information. If you just do a scan for like 1 day's worth of login attempts on a 365 tenant, you're not going to have a very clear picture. If you can show 3 to 4 weeks worth of data on that cool map about all these different login attempts, you're going to have a much better picture of like what their tenant and what their situation actually looks like. Phishing campaigns, we talked a little bit about it already. If you run just one, especially if they know it's coming, and for whatever reason, the business owners, even though they're the only ones that you're typically talking about this, do like to share that information with their staff. I think that they think if they get a good score on that report, then that part of the report, then they're going to be good and it's not going to cost them as much money. But we need to kind of combat that and get around that. So having at least 3 or 4 campaigns to go out to really get that good data on what their susceptibility is to click on those things is really, really important. So again, sounds like a lot of work. Why? Why do we do all of this stuff? Because it makes a difference. It sets us apart. It's that thing that makes what we're doing have value to where we can charge for it. It's that thing that is going to really show them that the information that they need to make this business decision. When we do this, it's not a big salesy kind of thing where we're sitting there going, hey, this is why you need to give us more money. This is, and I've absolutely told this to prospects in the past when I had my MSP. You can do whatever you want with the information, but what is important to me is that you know what this information in the first place, so that way you can make the best business decision moving forward.
So the other thing about this that's super key, Ryan, and I know you know this, but I'm fond of saying that what we want to do with our prospects and our clients is we want to have a shared bond of competence. Chris and I talk about this every month when we do our webinar. And part of that shared bond of competence is helping your prospects and clients recognize that you're taking this stuff very seriously. You're doing a comprehensive analysis of the people, the process, the technologies that are in there, right? And you're answering the question, how does this business really work, right? And what kind of are the reasonable protections for us to take? What are the security gaps, right? And people don't actually know the answer to that. So when we do a quickie scan, we're just giving them a quick snapshot of one component of the whole picture. We're not giving them the whole picture in a way to understand what the impact will be on their business. So a lot of people do different types of quickie scans for lead generation, right? Our comprehensive CSRA is not about lead gen. It's about building that shared bond of competence so that when you end up working an incident response situation, Everybody already knows how we work together and how we communicate.
And the other thing is when you do something quick and easy like that, that shows off to the client, right? Like they get that same impression, like, oh, that was quick and that was easy. So it doesn't have value. It doesn't mean anything to them. It's really easy for them to dismiss that kind of stuff. So that's why having that, because we're going so deep and because we're getting all of that information, that's where it really shows the value. And it ends up being a differentiator. I think some people look at this stuff and go, well, why would I spend all that time doing this when I can do this quickie scan and then, I'm in there first and I'm going to win the deal. And a lot of times they're competing on price at that point too.
That's really the big thing, right? You do a quickie scan, you don't have a strategy behind it, you don't use it as a door opener to go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go deeper and let's be comprehensive in what we're looking at. And remember, each one of these clients represents a real and material risk to your business.
That too.
So don't you want to know how they deal with things and how they deal with risk? And are they going to follow what you want them to do? Or, that's the whole thing. I mean, that's the other side of the coin, right?
And in most cases, that as opposed to it being the well, I'm just going to go the cheaper route. A lot of people, in my experience, will go, "Wow, that's a differentiator. Like nobody else has asked me these questions. Nobody else
That's
has
why.
told me this."
That's why. Unlike Demolition Man, every restaurant is not a Taco Bell. There are steak places out there.
Yep.
Boy, this is going to be the movie class that we're having here. So
right.
there you go.
And I think that segues into another great point too. Not everybody's going to be a fit. Not everybody's going to want to go ahead and do the CSRA. Not everybody's going to see the information that you see and see that risk and that light bulb.
Okay.
And it's okay because this also works to help you find the customers that are the ones that are going to be the that you want to work with, that are going to be the best people to work with. So there's a lot of different things going on here to make this a solid play and why we say all roads lead to the CSRA. Real quick, I just want to go over. We got a question in the comments here. Doug was asking about, or he didn't, not really a question, but he said we use Galactic Scan. So I think that's another good one to talk about as well. Galactic Scan is a great product. They do some of these things, but going back to us being tool agnostic, there's some overlap with Galactic Scan. Galactic Scan will grab some additional information in some respects as well, I believe. Because we're tool agnostic, again, I don't care where you get the passwords. I don't care where you get the dark web scan. It's about getting that information. And this doesn't have to be the only information that you get. If you can get more information to show a prospect or a client to let them really understand their risk, the more information that you can get, the more clear of a picture that you can show. So we do have clients within our membership that are using Galactic Scan, but they're using it in addition to all of these other things. So it ends up being a nice little augment that gives them more information to show their customers when they're presenting this stuff. So Galactic Scan, great product, no problem at all with it. Just make sure that you're gathering all of the data, not just the limited amount of data that Galactic Scan grabs. Let's see. Do we have anything else in the comments we want to talk?
Nope, we're all good.
All right, cool. And moving on. So again, so that's a lot of work. And what's really cool is for our members, we've also got something that we launched earlier this year called CSRA as a service. So all of that data gathering stuff that we talked about, that is something that our members have access to, a tool that will help them gather all of that. So it lets them focus a little bit more on the personal side of things, like having conversations with those C-level folks at these organizations to find out the human side of things and put that context around the different tools. So this is a really, really cool tool that we have available to us for our members to help streamline that process. And basically the way that works is it's a script that you can push out through your RMM and they gather all of that information into a nice little dashboard for you. So it's a really cool way of streamlining that process and allowing you to spend a little bit more time on some of that other stuff and not skip steps while you're doing it.
Right. And Doug had a question about other tools that you mentioned. Doug is using Galactic Scan and Breach Secure Now.
Mm-hmm. Breach Secure Now is great. That's something that we have and provide for our members for the things like the dark web scan and the phishing assessments. They've also got a really great security awareness training program for ongoing support. They've also got a really cool tool that I like to use as well, where it was kind of a quiz that you could give the end users as part of the assessment that kind of dives in a little bit the psychology of whether or not they're susceptible to different types of cyber attacks and how aware they are are of different types of things. So Breach Secure Now is a really great tool. And let me go back a little bit too. And we'll talk about some of the specific tools. I did miss that on some of them. All right, so we talked about SaaS alerts and Augment for the SaaS monitoring. That screenshot, by the way, was from SaaS Alerts. Phishing simulation platform, again, Breach Secure Now is a really good one for that. That is one that we use. That is a vendor partner of ours to monitor that stuff. Dark Web Scan, they do that. I know Galactic Scan does dark web. There's a bunch of different companies out there that do dark web scans. Vulnerability and network scanning. So we've got 2 vendor partners that we use for this right now, Cyber CNS and Nodeware. So these are great. And again, I can't emphasize enough the importance of making sure that you use a vulnerability and network scanner going forward for your ongoing support work with people. PII scanning, there's a bunch of these out there as well. Cyber CNS is doing this, and they've got a PII scanner in beta right now. And then we also have a partnership with Actifile, which is a really great PII scanner. They also do some really cool things with encryption for ongoing services. Password scanners, there's a bunch of these out there that have varying degrees of success. Nearsoft is probably one of the more popular ones, although that does tend to get a little bit tricky sometimes because most virus programs will block that. So this is one where, find what works well for you and use that.
And Ryan, what is it that stacks up most closely to Galactic Scan?
As far as the feature sets?
Yeah.
I have never used Galactic Scan, so I'm not certain on what matches up with that. I think there's a couple of things that Galactic Scan will do that we don't have categories here for. Like I said, it's a really good accent to grab more information. I do know that it grabs things like the passwords. It does kind of like a mini penetration test, is my.
So the one that shows the map, Douglas, is SaaS alerts. SaaS alerts. So that's where that's at. And thanks for putting the questions in. Really appreciate it.
No problem. That definitely helps. So what's next? So, that takes us through what we do with the CSRA, kind of a super high level going through that. I think the biggest things that I want you to take away from this are, one, again, all roads lead to a cybersecurity risk assessment. The really important thing is that these prospects, these customers need to understand what their risk is. And one of the things that we're seeing, that's kind of being driven by insurance is there is a responsibility on the part of the MSP to be having these conversations with people, because if they don't understand what their risk is and you're not talking to them about it, the assumption is that you're the expert in this situation and that you should know better. So you at the very least need to have this conversation with your customers and make recommendations on what they should be doing about these things, because otherwise, you're potentially opening the door for them to get breached and their insurance company to come back to you and say, why weren't you doing all of the things that need to be done?
So the liability lives with the MSP unless the MSP actively does something to make sure that the client understands the risk lives with the client. Yep. That's the game changer right there. And so I want you to imagine they get hacked, they call their insurance company up, and they think insurance is going to save them. And everybody's friends until the insurance company gets called. And then somebody's going to get stuck with the blame. And that's why we have to have a very strong cybersecurity risk assessment, because we want people to understand how diligent we are in uncovering their security gaps. That's what it's really all about, because they are not going to change what they pay you. They are not going to manage their risk until they realize that you're going to stop taking the risk on in your business.
And we see this happen. We have examples. Chris likes to use a story of one of our members all the time. And what was really cool about this was because a lot of this went down while we were at one of our live events last year. And it was exactly what we're talking about. This member had the conversation with their client. The client decided that they didn't need this. It was overkill. Our member gave them a risk acceptance notification just saying, hey, we've had this conversation. We talked to you about these things. We made these recommendations. You chose to accept that risk. And it was something like 3 weeks later that company had a business email compromise. And the first thing that they did when that happened, because they ended up transferring something like $125,000 to an attacker in a business email compromise, the first thing that they did was turn around and pointed the finger at him and said, "Why didn't you protect us?" And he, remember that letter that I gave you? Remember that conversation that we had? I told you that these are the things that are going on out there. This is what you can do to help prevent that. And they said, "Oh yeah, remember, I do remember that." And then they kind of like crawled away with their head hunkered down. And then I think it was a couple of days later, the insurance company came. Same thing. Why didn't you protect them? Hey, we had this conversation with them, and that came out, and so they immediately came after him. So he potentially had that liability, that responsibility, but because he did things the right way and he had that conversation, had the paperwork for that, he was able to insulate himself and shield himself. And the insurance company ended up only paying out like a certain percentage of the claim because they didn't do the things that they needed to do. And they very easily could have passed the blame to him had he not had that conversation.
And the real big thing, and maybe this is almost like a wrap-up point for us, but I want to make sure we hit this, is that things have changed so much in the last couple of years that you might have thought at some point in time that you can keep your clients safe and you can keep them from getting hacked. But there's one reason you can't, and it's very simple. You do not control their people.
Mm-hmm.
Well-meaning people can accidentally click on the wrong thing, and now you've got a cascading scenario where lots of things can happen, none of them good, and nobody could have stopped it. It's just how the world is now.
Right? Everybody is in a position where they're a target. And so the things that we're doing, and the recommendations that we make are not infallible. They're not 100%. People are getting hacked every day that have and do not have cybersecurity. So they need to understand that there's reasons why we do all of these things, and that our job is not to, we're never going to be able to protect them 100%. But what we can do at the end of the day is really limit that risk and make it a lot less likely that they're going to get attacked. We all know that hackers are lazy, and most of them will hit that roadblock and move on to the next soft target. But then, also importantly is if they do get through and they do get attacked, they do have an end user who clicks on something that they shouldn't and let somebody in the front door. All of those other pieces and layers that we put in place to help protect them are going to limit that blast radius. They're going to control that. They're going to allow us to recover quickly and get that business up and running. But these are all the conversations you need to be having with your clients, and you need to be having with your prospects, because you can't get away with just letting them assume that you're doing all of these things and just not talking about it. We all know that's the case. If somebody's paying you for IT, they are assuming that you are doing everything that you need to be doing for them. And you need to make sure that you have those conversations with people so that they understand that.
Cool.
All right. So what do we got next? So next week, we're going to talk about the philosophy behind your stack, help you scale your operations and grow your business. I think this one is probably maybe the least sexy looking one on the topic list, but I think it's one of the most important. I mean, it's one of the things that helped me scale my MSP and run super lean and do perform like a lot larger MSPs with a smaller staff that we had. So I think that's really important, and it can help bigger business as well. I mean, how many times do we see members come in and they have all of this success, and now they're like, now I don't have any time because we have to do all of this stuff for all of these new clients and all these new services that we're offering. And this is kind of where I fall back with those conversations. Like, let's streamline things. Let's look at your stack. Like, if you're still offering, precious metal plans, gold, silver, platinum for all of these people, and you've got these people on your new plan, like, what are the ones that are less noisy? In most cases, it's the ones that are on the new plan with all of the cybersecurity things, all of the things that that they need, because you're taking care of those tickets before they happen. So making sure that you look at stuff like that is really, really important. I think that's something that can really help a lot of other people's businesses. And then 2 weeks, we've got your support related tools. So we're going to talk about all of the things you need to do all of the IT stuff that we've been doing for years. And then in 3 weeks, we're going to get into the big one, the one that everybody's always interested in. What does a security stack look like? And what kind of tools are you including in that kind of thing to get that $300 plus a seat? So we're going to go into that in about 3 weeks. And then just to revisit and hit that one again, and in case you haven't noticed, we really want you to come visit us in Chicago or any of our live events. But I'm very excited about Chicago. Chicago's not that far away from me, so you think I'd be less excited about it. But Chicago has a fond place in my heart. I love hanging out in Chicago, so I'm really looking forward.
I think there's a song about that. My kind of town, Chicago is. There you go. Yeah, Chicago's going to be a great event. Last time, it was what I call a really nice event because we had a lot of people there. Ryan, I don't remember who the speakers are going to be there. I guess we'll get that looked up for next week.
I don't know that we have
And
announced those yet, so
we can let everybody know. But
Yep.
yeah, we've just every time Chris just keeps raising the bar
Yep.
on who the speakers are. So it's exciting stuff. Well, listen, everybody, thanks for being with us today. Really appreciate your time, and hope that you walked away with one good takeaway. So, just in the last couple of minutes that we've got here, if you've been following along and you've got the ability to chat with us, just let us know, what was your one big takeaway today? One big thing that you're like, it clicked for you. One big takeaway. Ryan, I know you were in the driver's seat driving, but what was your one big takeaway today?
I was the one giving things away, so I don't know
There
that
you
I have
go.
to
There
take
you
away.
go.
If I had one thing that I want you to take away from this, it's like I said, you need to have these conversations with your customers. It's so important. Whether they choose to listen to your advice or not, you need to have the conversation so that way you're protected. And it's also one of those things that regardless, they are going to understand that you're the expert. So like even if they look at this stuff and say, nope, that's overkill, I don't need that kind of stuff, eventually they're going to run into a situation where they realize that maybe they did need that kind of stuff, that this stuff is actually happening. And because you're the one that had this conversation with them, that difference maker kind of moment, they're gonna look at you as the expert, and you're gonna be the one that they call back and say, hey, we did have something happen. That stuff you said was we need to watch out for. It happened and we need your help. So establish yourself as the expert, have these conversations.
Yeah, my one big takeaway for today was it can happen to anybody, anywhere, anytime, any type of business. And Douglas is really nailing it here in the chat with his takeaways. Way to go, Douglas. Thanks for putting those in. No more packages like gold, silver, bronze. I think we can give Douglas a thumbs up on that.
And we're going to dive into that a little bit further next week when we go over the streamlining your stack.
Perfect segue. And then the other thing that was a huge takeaway, Douglas, this is beautiful the way you put this. Tailored solutions to their security risks and needs. So that's beautiful because that gets back to the idea that even though our process is the same every time we go through it, that they're getting a tailored solution. I think that's beautiful. So Ryan, you get the final word. Anything before we let everybody go?
Come see us next week when we talk about the next topic, and definitely mark your calendars and come see us in Chicago. It's one thing to be a part of this community and talk to other MSPs. It's a whole different ball game to stick with the baseball terms, to be in person and having these conversations with other MSPs. Our community is so cool. It was always the thing when I was a member before I came on board, that and I guess even being on board, that I'm most proud of is our people are different. I think they're so welcoming, so eager to help everybody else, and interested in helping everybody else succeed. So coming to those live events is really helpful to have those conversations and see that for yourself.
I'll tell you the one thing you will walk away with from a live event is you're going to hear detailed stories about how businesses are getting hacked every day. And so if you think this is a problem for some other time, some other place, you go to a live event, you're going to understand how deeply pervasive it is because nobody talks about it. So, okay, well, Ryan, I guess we ought to let everybody go, and see you next week.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.